Welcome to our new series, Vintage Recipes, where we take a look at the stories and recipes of bygone eras.
Oh, groovy, baby.
Today's recipe is pasta primavera. It's a ubiquitous dish that you can find on almost every Italian menu. And what's not to love? I mean, when it's done right, it's this beautifully balanced, creamy pasta dish so chock full of fresh vegetables that you can pretend like you're eating healthy. Which you are not. And then there's its pedigree, one of the oldest and most respected recipes in the Italian lexicon. If that lexicon started in circa 1975, which is when Sirio Macchioni created it and then started serving it at his offensive French restaurant Le Cirque in New York City. Now, the origins of this dish are up for debate, but my favorite apocryphal story is the one that he tells in his own memoirs, wherein he is in a Canadian hunting lodge with a baron from Italy and his retinue, and after days of feasting on delicious salmon and wild boar, the baron was like, I just kind of want to taste a home. Can you make me some pasta? And Sirio was like, of course I can make you some pasta with all the tomatoes I don't have in the fridge. And he freaked out. He didn't know what he was going to do. And his wife stepped in and she was like, honey, chill out. There's all kinds of other vegetables in here. We're going to figure something out. Just, you know what? Take a break. And together they took everything out of the fridge, threw it all together, and this is according to the son Mauro later on in an interview. They threw all this stuff together and presented it. And when everybody loved it and they were asking, oh, what do you call this? What do you serve at your restaurant? He said, it's pasta primavera. So, contrary to popular belief, this is not some age-old recipe. Although, as Lydia Bastianich said in her video on the subject, I mean, Italians have been cooking with pasta and vegetables since forever. But it wasn't a thing until Sirio made it his off-menu specialty at Le Cirque. And he had to cook it in the hallway, because his fancy French chef wouldn't let him cook an Italian recipe in his fancy French kitchen, which is ironic because this dish became the talk of the town in Manhattan, eclipsing anything that came out of that fancy French kitchen for quite some time. So how they would make this is some toady would take care of 90% of the prep in a hallway behind the scenes and then wheel out this giant table with a burner on it, and Sirio would just stand there and put the stuff together tableside while discussing God knows what with his elite clientele. So, as with any recipe that finds its way into the culinary zeitgeist the way that this one did, it was served everywhere. And it must have been a chef's wet dream. If you think about it, every single thing in this recipe is an easily to access, very cheap, margin-friendly ingredient. And it was easy to make. Except it wasn't easy to make. It was really hard to make. I mean, it had 16 individual ingredients and 10 pain-in-the-ass steps. And every single type of vegetable had to be blanched for a different amount of time to get the texture just right. And every tomato had to be cut just so for the topping. And just the right amount of cream and just the right amount of cheese had to be added in just the right way, tableside in Sirio's case, to get this thing to be what everybody wanted. And so the inevitable decline of the dish commenced, taking what used to be a culinary masterpiece and transforming it into this awful roasted vegetable concoction that I can only assume Giada's interns came up over a, hangover cure of Pedialyte cocktails. And that bastardization is why people like my grandma would never let me order it when I went out to eat. She'd be like, why are you trying to pay for disgusting pasta and mushy vegetables? Get something good, get a steak. And she was right. Every single time I did manage to order this, it sucked. So I want to make a version that doesn't suck. I want to make a version that Sophia Loren would have sold her pearls for. I want to make Sirio's version of this dish with all 10 pain-in-the-ass steps and all 16-ish pain-in-the-ass ingredients. And that's what we're going to do today. So buckle up, Buttercup. We're going in. Look at all this stuff. This is what it takes to make pasta primavera right. The first thing we have to do is chop up each individual vegetable into precisely the correct shape and size. This is a lot harder than you'd expect because you have to take the density of the thing into consideration as well as the actual size. How dense and hard a vegetable is will have a lot to do with how long you have to blanch it to achieve the elusive, crisp, tender texture that we're going for. How can you get something both crisp and tender, you may ask? Magic and good timing. It's basically the vegetable equivalent of al dente noodles. Now, obviously, we're not going to be blanching every damn thing we're prepping here. This garlic, for instance, will join our mushrooms for a nice quick sauté, and we'll also cozy up to our tomatoes for a quick sear. The aromatics, in this case basil and parsley, will be added periodically to damn near everything, and we will also be using that as garnish. Now that is what I call a nice mise en place. Hot. This hot mess you see before you is what I'm calling my blanching station. You got your hot water, your ice water, and your drainage. And we're doing double drainage today because that is how I roll. Okay, let's get this party started. To this hot water, I'm going to add a generous palmful of salt so that our veggies might season themselves as well as becoming tender. Now we're going to start by blanching the heaviest and sturdiest vegetable first, which happens to be our broccoli florets. This matters because I'm anal retentive and I want the least crushable veggie at the bottom of the draining colander. Now in with the asparagus pieces. Don't forget to fish those tips out first, they're going to cook faster. Zucchini in next, and I'm fishing these out individually while blanching the sugar snap peas. Green beans and frozen peas, and done. So the next part of the show is sauteing our delicious mushrooms, which we shall do in some olive oil and garlic. Now, it's important not to crowd the pan, which I did, but as you'll see soon enough, I was just getting some pan crowding practice in for later, and they turned out okay anyway. Moving on to tomatoes, which mysteriously appear in this dish, even though Sirio said he didn't have any in that story I told. I guess he found a few. Anyway, these get barely seared in olive oil and garlic with our basil. Now we have all the constituent parts of our pasta primavera, so all that's left to us to do is put them together with the panache and style that Sirio himself might have used tableside at Le Cirque. In with some butter and a tablespoon of olive oil, and let that melt before adding the last of our garlic. Then in with about 3/4 of our heavy cream, to which we'll add some of our grated Parmesan. Stir until smooth, wash, rinse, and repeat until the Parmesan is gone and the sauce is silky smooth. A few twists of the pepper grinder, and then in with our 1/4 cup of chicken stock and stir. Now we throw in our homemade pasta and toss to coat with the sauce. If necessary, we add a little more cream to loosen up the sauce, and then add half the veggies, and immediately realize that your pan is way too small and forge bravely ahead anyway. Add the second half of the veggies, then toss, in my case, very gingerly to coat everything in that amazing sauce. Seriously, my life would have been so much easier if I just admitted my mistake and gotten a bigger pan, but that is not apparently how I roll. Now we add juice from the seared tomato and basil, and this touch is actually a stroke of genius because it moistens the dish while adding this pungent kick of acid. Now it's time for the finishing touch, a generous handful of toasted pine nuts, and we're done. All right. What a pain in the ass that was, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna be worth it because, I mean, I was secretly picking at stuff and it tasted really good, so I'm super excited to dig in here. Okay, so this would all be plated, and then they would lovingly spoon over these really sort of piquant tomatoes here, and they would Madam like some pine nuts? Madam would like some pine nuts, and we get a good bit of pepper. Whatever small amount of parsley we have left. All right, let's dig in. Let's see what we got going on here. There is just the perfect amount of cream. It just coats the pasta. I stand by my substitution of linguine. I think it's better than the spaghetti. I think the sauce sort of complements it better. It's really an intensely garlic flavor. So whether it's because of the garlic that you put in with the mushrooms or the garlic you put in the end, the cream sauce is just perfumed with this garlic, and sure enough, that sort of tomato salsa just brightens the whole thing up. Gives it this nice acidic bite. I think the thing that I'm most enamored of, to be honest, is the perfect ratio of pasta to vegetable. You're not drowning in veggies. You're not trying to like pick out the veggies or like, you know, they just sort of like mesh with the pasta really, really well. With that pine nut, that toasty, rich flavor of the pine nuts. This is a really well-balanced dish. It's delicious. And it's definitely worth taking the time to blanch everything separately, even though that was a gigantic pain in the ass, because each one of these vegetables is just the perfect texture. So I really think that Pasta Primavera, pain in the ass though it may be, was a fantastic first shot for our vintage recipe series, and I cannot wait for the next one. It's gonna be amazing. No spoilers, but super excited. So if you like this video, obviously click like, and please subscribe because there's way more where this came from. If you have any ideas for vintage recipes, or you know of anything that's like really good or really awful, let me know in the comments or hit me up on Instagram at ZestyPavlova. The recipe for this guy is going to be on our blog absolutenom.com, and we'll have a link to that in the description. All right, until next time, happy cooking.